everybody. Welcome to another episode of Off Script with Pastor Jared.
And Aaron, the intern.
Back in the studio by popular demand. Love to have him. I have Aaron here today again because I was thinking about this episode I wanted to do and who my target audience might be. And I thought to myself, it is exactly Aaron, the intern, and his people, his Gen Z people, and probably some millennials as well. I hear this running all the way up, probably through age 40, what I want to talk about today. And that is the topic of persecution, and I want to call this episode Starry-Eyed Persecution. And the reason I want to talk about this, Aaron, is because I see something, and it's hard for me to put my finger on it because, you know, you're scrolling Facebook, you're scrolling Twitter, you're watching YouTube, you're seeing blogs and articles pass you by, and it's not like one big moment where you see the trend has crystallized and now there's a movement. It's just you see little pieces of it here and there, and you start to think, I think there's a thought out there in the world, and what I'm trying to do is put boundaries around that thought and name it. All right, here's what I'm seeing. I think a lot of young people, we'll say 40 and under is the target demographic, have a view of persecution that is almost positive and looking forward to it and excited about it, and this great thing in the future that we're going to have that's going to purify our churches. It's going to actually make our churches grow. It's going to be this nitrous explosion of growth in our churches. It's exactly what we need. And so we kind of almost are phrasing it as we're looking forward to it. So I'm seeing it out there. Have you seen that at all, what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You don't have to explain it, but just have you seen it?
Yes.
Okay.
I have.
All right. Do you think I'm characterizing it correctly?
I think so. I think also not maybe like focusing not just on numerical growth, but also a lot of people will say that we will spiritually grow stronger. Maybe not numerically, but specifically the strength of our faith.
Okay. So I've got a quote here that I want to kick off with that I think is really just puts it all together by a pastor named Matt Trewhella. And he said this on his Facebook post. I saw it, and it says this: Christians love romanticizing a future martyrdom as it helps them justify their indifference to the present evil in the land. So I'm not inside his head, but what I'm guessing he means by that is that when you put all your chips into this futuristic pain, that, you know, then at that point, then things will really get serious. You know, it allows you to sort of push everything off to the future and not really care about right now, and not really care that things are getting worse and worse, and sort of let the justification be, well, this is what's supposed to happen. The Bible says we're supposed to be persecuted, and almost just go with it because we see in the Bible that persecution is a normal part of the Christian experience. It's something that all the apostles dealt with. Right. The early church obviously dealt with and was persecuted. You can read about it in the Bible, in Acts, and then especially in early church history. Right. Before Constantine, it was heavy. And the church did grow during that time. So I think that we see that, and there's almost like this yearning to go back to that. But what I want to say to young people is I don't think you understand what you're asking for. There's a bit of naivety in that mindset that I just want to make sure people understand what they're saying. So I want to go through a couple things. All right. So the sentiment, in essence, is that we should welcome persecution because it will reveal the true church, and we will grow and flourish. And my position on that is that that's a naive position among younger people and sheltered Christians who've never really seen anything. So what I want to do is just bring up some historical examples just to muddy the waters a bit. All right. So my pushback to that point is going to be that I'm going to question the assumption that the church actually does flourish during times of persecution, because Now, this is my own quote. All right, I made my own quote here. Ready for it?
Yeah.
Persecution does purify, but it can also stamp out. It can stamp out the church in a place, okay? So let me give you just the first example that came to my mind because I watched a movie on it years ago, and I don't know if I can fully endorse the movie because thinking back on it, it was rated R and it was kind of rough. But Martin Scorsese made a movie with Andrew Garfield as the star, Adam Driver as the co-star, and Liam Neeson also in the movie. It was called Silence. I don't know if you remember seeing it, if you saw it. I haven't
seen it, but I've talked a lot about it with other people.
Yeah, so. It's one of those movies like The Passion of the Christ where you watch it and you're like, I could probably go my whole life and not need to watch that again. It was so heavy and just like, oh man, dark on the whole movie. Obviously, that movie was made from a Catholic perspective. It was Scorsese is a just horribly non-Christian
that's a one big
director
thing that I've heard time and time again. Is people were like, "Well, the theology was kind of
it was
bad.
a Catholic theology, and I would say pop culture Catholic theology, but they captured what I feel like the time period, and the persecution. So the movie, basically, if you don't want to watch it, because you probably shouldn't, I don't know, maybe you don't need to, but the movie was that Liam Neeson's character was this Catholic missionary who was over in Japan, and he got lost. They couldn't find him anymore, and so at this time, Japan has decided to boot all the missionaries out. So Japan flips its persecution switch on. They decide as a country, we're going to persecute because we want a more unified Japanese traditional culture with Shinto being number one and all in ancestral veneration.
This is based off of a true story?
This is all based on truth. Okay. Yeah, this happened in the 17th century, 1600s. So they could not find Liam Neeson's character. So Andrew Garfield, Adam Driver's character, two Catholic missionaries decide to go try to find him. And they're now going into a Japan that has violently turned and tried to stamp out all Christianity. So they're sneaking through. It's kind of like a spy thing where they're going in undercover. They're seeing little glimpses of the underground church. They see persecution as they're going through. And the force of the movie is when they get there, they find that Liam Neeson's character has turned and has converted to the other religion. He's
apostatized.
Yeah, he stepped on the statue of Christ. They make you step on the picture of Jesus' face and say that you turn away from your faith. You're no longer a Christian. So that's a movie, but it's based on a true story that there were Christian gains in Japan during the time period. There were a lot of missionaries making a lot of ground in Japan, and it was becoming rapidly Christianized. Then that's why. So they switched and they decided no more. Boom, they dropped the hammer and all the missionaries were booted out. And there effectively was an extreme underground church and all the missionaries were gone. So what happened? Well, to kind of take the starry-eyed view of persecution, you would expect this thriving underground church to grow in strength and boldness, and that's just not what happened. Like they just ceased to exist. There was no church that really existed. There was no trace of Christianity in Japan leading up to World War II. Even today, the percentage Christian, it's one of the largest unreached people groups. It is a massively unreached people because of this time. So that's just one example. And then I think I brought some papers in here. So some historical mass persecutions. Some of these were not necessarily religious, but they had the fallout of being religious. So the Armenian genocide, for example, that 1.5 million people, a lot of the Armenians were Christians. By the Ottoman Empire and the Turks were the ones that did this to them. A lot of them were Christians. And so, today Turkey is not a heavily Christian country. Obviously, you have Russia and what Stalin did. Some death tolls put that as high as 20 million.
Goodness.
There was not a strong Christian presence in communist countries. North Korea is not on this list because nobody knows those numbers, but there's not a thriving church in North Korea. That government tyranny has effectively squashed it. And the things from Stalin's Russia are some of the worst atrocities that anybody would know. Obviously, Hitler's Holocaust, that death toll, 6 million or so for the Jews, and that wasn't against Christians, but it was against Jews. Obviously, that didn't, make the Jews thrive or anything like that. The Cambodian killing fields, as they call it, Pol Pot, around 2 million deaths. That's another communist example when communism came into Cambodia. And then I've got my last example here. Well, actually, I got two examples that I want to close with. The big one, I'll give you just one more. The big one is Mao's China, Mao Zedong's China, which would have been in the 1900s. I mean, that's not that long ago. And that would have been much more. Most estimates put that over Russia's Stalin.
Really?
They put that as beyond. And so a lot of people look at China as an example of recent revival, but when you look at how and why that revival happened, that revival began after Mao got out of power and China started to want to become part of the global economy, and they allowed some capitalist things in, and their economy freed up a little bit. What you see now is that they're going backwards. So they're right now, today, they are going more communist than they ever have been, in the last 30 years. They've decided, President Xi has decided to revert and be more like Mao than the previous.
So you're saying
regime.
the growth in the church isn't a result of Mao's persecution?
No, it's because China decided to adopt some free market stuff and become a little more open to the world. So you had a lot more going on over there. And we know this because some of our missionaries are dealing with this. Right. They used COVID to kick out missionaries from China. Yeah. So my guess is it's going to get less. The percentage of Christian in China is going to get less and less because the Chinese Communist Party is getting emboldened right now, and they're feeling strong. And I think it's going to get worse in China, not better. And so I got one more list, and that's today's most persecuted countries. So I've got this is the World Watch list from Open Doors USA. They're kind of the authority on this. They rank every year the top 50 most persecuted places, and they give just a little reason why. So number 1, Afghanistan, no shock to that. Number 2, North Korea. So Afghanistan is Islamic. For Islamic reasons, the Taliban's now running that country. North Korea, we know the Kims are running that country with communism. 3, 4, 5 are all Islamic. That's Somalia, Libya, Yemen. We keep going. Eritrea, Nigeria, Pakistan, Iran. Those are all Islamic. And then India is number 10. That's religious nationalism. So they want a Hindu nation. They want Hindu nationalism, essentially, is what they're looking for. So they're working against Christianity and Islam and Buddhism. They don't really want it there. You keep going down the list: Saudi Arabia, Myanmar, Sudan, Iraq, Syria, Maldives, China at number 17. There's more communism. Qatar, Vietnam, Egypt, Uzbekistan, Algeria, Mauritania, Mali, Turkmenistan. That's the top 25. Yeah. So obviously, you look at those places, you kind of can test the theory. None of those places have a real thriving church. Now, I've heard some reports that things are happening in Iran, to be fair, that there's a little bit of an underground bubbling there. But those are the most persecuted places. So the reason I'm doing that is to test the theory. If the theory is persecution strengthens and helps the church to grow, couldn't we then look at some of the most persecuted countries and see a strong church presence growing? My thought is, we look at those names and they're just not there.
Yeah, seems like it.
because that's back to my original theory. Usually, the problem is when persecution is government based. You almost stand no chance because the government has all of the mechanisms to work against you. They can control so much. They have resources, and they can put other things in its place, whether they say it's Islam or whether they say it's communism, which is pretty much all the top 25 is one of the two. So again, I'm questioning this idea that we should be looking towards persecution as this positive thing, because everywhere it goes, it drastically reduces the number of salvations and people practicing their faith and following Jesus openly.
I think if I can argue against that
go
just
ahead.
a little bit.
I'm ready.
So I think what the mindset and heart is behind those who say that they desire for the American church to experience persecution and see benefits from that is that though we may not see the number of salvations and professions of faith increase during persecution, I think the numbers that are represented are much more real. So it's like, so for example, you ask, I mean, you can't ask him, but like from what he said in his messages, like Billy Graham would have said that 75% of the American church is unregenerate or not born again. That it's just become a cultural norm back in his time to be like, oh, well, I'm a Christian, I go to church. And I think that over the past couple of years, especially in America, I think we've kind of started to move away from that whole cultural Christianity norm.
For sure.
And I think because of that, the true Christians and the true church has had to step up more. So maybe persecution doesn't bring the numbers, but maybe it brings the I guess realness of it, if that makes any sense. Like and I don't know, that's so difficult because I don't know. Even with the American church, even like recently with COVID, I think even that has been even just like a small taste, not even a comparison to what these other countries are going through, even a small taste of persecution per se, in that a lot of places were told they weren't allowed to meet for worship. A lot of people were told to stay home and not meet for worship.
Yeah, that was the first time anybody's felt that.
Right. And now that those restrictions have taken back, like, I don't know what the overall numbers are, but looking at churches that I know personally,
it's less.
It's way less people coming to church now, way less people living for Christ, way less people. And it's not that they've lost their salvation. Like Paul would have said, like they went out from us because they weren't of us, right? Like it wasn't that they were Christians before the persecution and now they're not, but more so that persecution has had to make people like really test, like their faith is really being tested. And those who aren't truly rooted in Christ, are, outwardly falling away from their easy believe faith.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that's good. It's a good thing when the fire is passed over and it tests to see what's legitimate, what burns up and what stays behind. I think that's good. It's good to know, to have an accurate inventory of the church. But at the same time, we're in a unique situation in America where we're breathing air that's been Christian for so long that, and we are baked into our country, in our Constitution is a Christian worldview, at least, that's in there, and protections for the church baked into our Constitution and Bill of Rights. So I think we're in a position to sort of have this conversation when because we know it's going to be a harder road for things to flip here, to do a complete flip than China, for example, where you elect the wrong dictator and it's over. Yeah. You can just decide, wave the flag and say, no more Christians, it's over. I mean, that's what that happened in India when they put in Modi. He was a Hindu nationalist, and he just said, you know what, my party platform is going to be, we're going to return to a Hindu India. Yeah. And boom.
He had no freedom of religion to
no, it's not a part of their
be held accountable to.
No, it's not a part of their documents. It's not a part of their founding principles. So I guess what I'm trying to do is to explain to a lot of naive young people that haven't seen anything and haven't read anything or listened to interviews of people who have been in persecuted places. Like, this is awful when it happens. Like, we're talking like a death on extreme numbers, family, friends, being thrown in prison just for ridiculous, unjust things that you didn't even do, having to smuggle Bibles, being not able to get a copy of the Word. I just don't get excited about that. Thinking about having to meet with people in secret locations and not being able to sing our songs and, preach from a pulpit and do the thing, it's just hard to get excited about that for me because I know how dark that can be just from reading and talking to others that have gone through it. Look at in Africa right now, like it's Christians are worshiping and all of a sudden machete wielding, Muslim extremists come through and just wipe out everybody and life moves on. It's like, well, that's part of it. That's persecution, purifies the church. It's like, man, I don't know though.
Yeah.
That's rough stuff, and I'm not going to look forward to that and say that's what, bring it on here because that's what we want. I just don't know if that's going to bring the net positive that everybody thinks it's going to bring. I think that's going to bring a net negative on the kingdom overall. Mm-hmm. You look at what America has been able to do globally with our Christian influence and the number of people saved and our missionary force. And it just seems like the more freedom you get, the more effect you can have for Christ. But, you want to stand when persecution does come. So let me tell you what really bothers me about this, because that was all my just point number one. My second point that I want to make is I don't mind you making this point, all right? Let me tell you why. I trust you. I think when the fire comes, you're down. You're down to stand firm, right? Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
I pray so.
Yeah. I hope that's true of myself too. What bothers me is when I hear this idea being championed by people who aren't even strong now when there's nothing on the line.
Yeah.
So a quote, I'm not going to tell you who this quote's from, but I found it's a Instagram post, a Twitter post from a pretty influential pastor right now who basically is extolling the extolling the virtues of Christianity existing on the margins of society. Like that's where we need to be and that's where we want to be. Uh-huh. Okay, so he says, Many Christians are holding on for dear life to maintain a place in society that is rapidly changing, but there's nothing to fear. Historically, Christianity has flourished most when it's been on the margins. It's also important not to conflate the presence of God in the land with symbols of religious and institutional power. If the Bible teaches anything, it presents a God whose presence is not contingent on people being in power. The center of God's activity is usually on the margins. Now, in theory, I agree with that. That's a true statement. But I know what he means, and that's what bothers me. What he means is we are going to be better when we're less, when we're more pushed to the side, when we're more persecuted, when we're more experiencing sort of that being negated on the margins of society. Then we'll be at our best, and then we'll really see the results. My problem with that is that pastor is extremely weak. Mm-hmm. He doesn't go hard now. He doesn't call sin out now. He doesn't, because I read his take on the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court case when it came out. It was the weakest middle of the road, not take a position thing I've ever read. It was like you might as well have just said, well, we all have our thoughts, but it was 2 pages to say that. It was nothing. And so to pretend like that guy, when persecution rolls through, real hard persecution rolls through, is going to all of a sudden become this champion and stand up there and preach and herald God's word against government tyranny and against, real violent people that want to hurt him. I don't buy it. I just don't buy that that's going to happen, because my thought is, if you're not strong now, when it's the weakest, it's the easiest time maybe in world history to be bold for Christ in America today. or at least in America, maybe 20 years ago. We'll go back, but because it has gone down a little bit, but
it's still pretty easy comparative to other.
Come on, if you can't be bold right now, you got no chance when the fire comes.
Right.
We don't know how to suffer. We don't know what it's like. I mean, COVID broke a lot of pastors. COVID, like you were talking about that. That was just a little teeny taste of persecution. That was not the great trial. That was not the big capital T tribulation or any. That was not the fire. So I just don't buy it. All these people that look at persecution with stars in their eyes and say, well, this will be better for this. I look forward to a day when the church is on the margins. Then we'll really see who's who. It's like, dude, you're not going to be there. You're not standing up now when there's absolutely nothing to push against you. So anyway, I'll close my thoughts on using a verse, persecution, and I want to read it to you, everybody listening. 1 Peter 4:12 through 14, to sort of center our discussion a little bit. It says, Peter says, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, so that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you." So what's Peter saying? When it comes, stand firm. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid that it's coming. And at the same time, don't be surprised when it comes. And at the same time, rejoice that you're counted worthy to suffer for Christ's name. Now, to me, you can hold that and not look forward to it at the same time. And that's the position I want to have. I want to say, I hope it doesn't come. I hope that my kids and grandkids and great grandkids get to grow up in a country where they can stand on the street corner and preach the gospel, and they can build church buildings that are safe places to preach and hear and have Christian education. I hope we can have seminaries. I hope we can keep sending missionaries out to the world. I want all of that. I want all that. But if it comes, I'm ready. I'm not afraid. I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing.
Right.
We may have to, switch our methods a bit, not be as out in the open, but we're still going to go hard, and nothing's going to change, and I'm going to rejoice in the Lord when it comes. Do you think there's any way, am I conflicting myself here?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And just to, so I think I don't know that I would still hold that I hope persecution comes, but I think I used to hold it for a specific reason. I think it's a reason that a lot of people in good heart try to hold it. So for me, it was more so that I have seen a lot of, how should I say, like non-believers within the American church.
Cultural
and
Christians?
Yeah, very cultural Christians who it's just not real to them. And it's a little bit frustrating, I guess, because it is so easy to just sit in a church pew your entire life, show up on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and never be, questioned or pushed in any direction, and just easily claim to be a Christian your entire life. And to me, that's a little bit frustrating, because I see people who are being persecuted and actually have to stand up for their faith. So I think part of me that used to desire persecution in the Church of America, I think primarily desired it because I was tired of seeing non-believers pretending to be believers.
So it's almost like you wanted reform, but you wanted persecution to do it for you.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense, though.
And I used to very happily and openly tell people that. And then I was reading Matthew 13, if I can read it real quick, where Jesus talks about the wheat and the tares. So he says, Matthew 13, starting in verse 40, "So just as the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so it shall be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness, and will throw them into the furnace of fire, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. And I used to say, well, why don't we separate the wheat from the tares now? Like, I'm tired of having all the tares among the wheat. Let's just get rid of them.
Yeah.
And then I read that and I was like, well, that's not my job to do. My job would be to faithfully proclaim the gospel, to love others, to, evangelize the sinner and sanctify the saint. It's the Lord's job to separate the righteous and the unrighteous. I don't think that means that we shouldn't have like regenerate church membership where people should be Christians to be among the church.
Sure.
But I think even within that, we'd be naive to think there aren't going to be unbelievers in there.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't go on a witch hunt and forget that we should be sharing the gospel and forget that there are other things that are more important than that, because Christ will ultimately divide the wheat from the tares, and that's not my doing to do currently. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the passage that really changed my mind on it. I think everything you said today in this podcast has been affirmative of your stance on persecution not always strengthening the church. Yeah, just because the first church, the early church, was persecuted and we saw them thrive through it.
Has that happened again? I wonder. And I'm not a historical genius. I don't know every little event in history, but it seems like that was unique. Mm-hmm. And the norm is that persecution really squashes the church and stamps out. But to what Jesus said, that the gates of hell won't stand against it. Like, we're still here, and we're going to still be here, even if a big persecution wave does come through. Mm-hmm. I still think we'll still be here. The candle, the light may have to go to another country for a time, like with Japan. To go back to that example, Britain had the light, USA's had the light. There may come a time when Africa's got to hold that candle, or South America's got to hold that candle, and we go through our time when it's dark, and then 500 years later the candle comes back. That's how God works. Ultimately the candle doesn't go out. That's what we know. So, all right, to summarize, my main thought today was to make sure that young people don't unrealistically have a giddiness about them for persecution, who've never seen anything, don't know anything, and don't understand the horrors of real persecution, especially government tyrannical persecution, because sometimes it can have an extremely negative effect on the church. Not what you think it's going to do, where it purifies us and we're all holding hands singing Kumbaya in the underground church and it's wonderful. It can be really bad. So just to say, like, we don't be excited to lose what we have right now, because what we have is special. Even now at the end, running on the fumes of what we used to have, even what we have now can be recovered if we just stand firm now and don't give it up, don't let it go, and don't be so excited about persecution that we prematurely plunge ourselves into persecution because we didn't stand up when we could have. All right, that's it. I hope y'all have a wonderful, wonderful week. Enjoy this podcast. Share it with a friend that needs to hear it. And most importantly, go to a Bible-believing, Bible-preaching church this Sunday. If you're looking for one, I know one. It's Kirby Woods Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee. Come see us 10:30 a.m. Sunday. God bless.